Outside, the treetops stumbled and tossed with a foamy whoosh, like club soda bubbling up in the glass. The windows were open, and a damp, cool breeze swirled through the curtains, bewitchingly wild and sweet. Henry was in excellent spirits, relaxed, sitting in an armchair with his legs outstretched in front of him. He was alert, well rested, quick with a laugh or a clever reply. Camilla looked enchanting. She wore a narrow sleeveless dress, salmon-colored, which exposed a pair of pretty collarbones and the sweet, frail vertebrae at the base of her neck. Lovely kneecaps, lovely ankles, lovely bare, strong, muscled legs. The dress exaggerated her spareness of body, her unconscious and slightly masculine grace of posture. I loved her, loved the luscious, stuttering way she would blink while telling a story, or the way, faint echo of Charles, that she held a cigarette caught in the knuckles of her bitten-nailed fingers. She and Charles seemed to have made up. They didn't talk much, but the old silent thread of twinship seemed in place again. They perched on the arms of each other's chairs and fetched drinks back and forth, a peculiar twin ritual, complex and charged with meaning. Though I did not fully understand these observances, they were generally a sign that all was well. She, if anything, seemed the more conciliatory party, which seemed to disprove the hypothesis that he was at fault. The mirror over the fireplace was the center of attention. A cloudy old mirror in a rosewood frame. Nothing remarkable. They got it at a yard sale, but it was the first thing one saw when one stepped inside, and now even more conspicuous. Because it was cracked, a dramatic splatter that radiated from the center like a spider's web. How that had happened was such a funny story that Charles had to tell it twice, though it was his reenactment of it that was funny, really. Spring house cleaning, sneezing in miserable dust, sneezing himself right off his stepladder and landing on the mirror, which had just been washed and was on the floor. What I don't understand, said Henry, is how you got it back up again without the glass falling out. It was a miracle. I wouldn't touch it now. Don't you think it looks kind of wonderful? Which it did. There was no denying it. The spotty dark glass shattered like a kaleidoscope and refracting the room into 100 pieces. Not until screen and a pair of andirons, but the logs that lay across them were furry with dust. But now, glancing down, I saw something else. Silver sparkles, bright needled splinters from the broken mirror, mixed with large, unmistakable shards of a gold-rimmed highball glass, the twin of the one in my own hand. They were heavy old glasses, an inch thick at the bottom. Someone had thrown this one hard, with a pretty good arm, from across the room, hard enough to break it to pieces and shatter the looking glass behind my head. 2 nights later, I was woken again by a knock at the door. Confused, in a foul temper, I switched on the lamp and reached blinking for my watch. It said 3 o'clock. "Who's there?" I said. Henry came the surprising reply. I let him in, somewhat reluctantly. He didn't sit down. "Listen," he said. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but this is very important. I have a favor to ask of you." His tone was quick and businesslike. It alarmed me. I sat down on the edge of my bed. "Are you listening to me?" "What is it?" I said. "About 15 minutes ago, I got a call from the police. Charles is in jail. He has been arrested for drunk driving. I want you to go down and get him out." A prickle rose on the nape of my neck. "What?" I said. "He was driving my car. They got my name from the registration sticker. I have no idea what kind of condition he's in." He reached into his pocket and handed me an unsealed envelope. "I expect it's going to cost something to get him out. I don't know what." I opened the envelope. Inside was a check, blank except for Henry's signature, and a $20 bill. "I already told the police that I lent him my car," said Henry. "If there's any question about that, have them call me." He was standing by the window, looking out. "In the morning, I'll get in touch with a lawyer. All I want you to do is get him out of there as soon as you can." It took a moment or two for this to sink in. "What about the money?" I said at last. "Pay them whatever it costs. I mean this $20. You'll have to take a taxi. I took one over here. It's waiting downstairs." There was a long silence. I still wasn't awake. I was sitting there in just an undershirt and a pair of boxer shorts. While I dressed, he stood at the window, looking out at the dark meadow, hands clasped behind his back, oblivious to the jangle of clothes hangers and my clumsy sleep-days fumbling through the bureau dressers. Serene, preoccupied, lost, apparently in his own abstract concerns. It wasn't until I dropped Henry off and was being driven at a rapid clip towards the dark center of town that I realized how poorly I had been appraised of the situation jail in Hampton Town was in an annex of the courthouse. It was also the only building in the square that had any lights on that time of night. I told the taxi driver to wait and went inside. Two policemen were sitting in a large, well-lit room. There were many filing cabinets and metal desks behind partitions, an old-fashioned water cooler, a gumball machine from the Civitan Club. Your change changes things. I recognized one of the policemen, a fellow with a red mustache, from the search parties. The two of them were eating fried chicken, the sort you buy from under the heat lamps in convenience stores, and watching Sally Jesse Raphael on a portable black and white TV. Hi, I said. They looked up. I came to see about getting my friend out of jail. The one with the red mustache wiped his mouth on a paper napkin. He was big and pleasant looking, in his 30s. That's Charles Macaulay, I bet, he said. He said this as if Charles were an old friend of his. Maybe he was. Charles had spent a lot of time down here when the stuff with Bunny was going on. The cops, he said, had been nice to him. They'd sent out for sandwiches, bought him Cokes from the machine. You're not the guy I talked to on the phone, said the other policeman. He was large and relaxed, about 40, with gray hair and a frog-like mouth. Is that your car out there? I explained. They ate their chicken and listened. Big, friendly guys. Big police. 38s on their hips. The walls were covered in government issue posters. Fight Britivex. Hire veterans. Report mail fraud. Well, you know, we can't let you have the car, said the policeman with the red mustache. Mr. Winter is going to have to come down here and pick it up himself. I don't care about the car. I just want to get my friend out of jail. The other policeman looked at his watch. Well, he said, come back in about 6 hours then. Was he joking? I have the money, I said. We can't set bail. The judge will have to do that at the arraignment, 9 o'clock in the morning. Arraignment. My heart jumped. What the hell was that? The cops were looking at me blandly, as if to say, is that all? Can you tell me what happened? I said. What? My voice sounded flat and strange to me. What exactly did he do? State trooper pulled him over out on Deep Kill Road, said the gray-haired policeman. He said it as if he were reading it. He was obviously intoxicated. He agreed to a breathalyzer and failed it when it was administered. The trooper brought him down here, and we put him in lockup. That was about 2:25 a.m. Things still weren't clear, but for the life of me, I couldn't think of the right questions to ask. Finally, I said, can I see him? He's fine, said the policeman said with the red mustache. You can see him first thing in the morning. All smiles, very friendly. There was nothing more to say. I thanked them and left. When I got outside, the cab was gone. I still had $15 from Henry's 20, but to call another cab, I'd have to go back inside the jail, and I didn't want to do that. So I walked down Main Street to the south end, where there was a payphone in front of the lunch counter. It didn't work. So tired I was almost dreaming. I walked back to the square, past the post office, past the hardware store, past the movie theater with its dead marquee, plate glass, cracked sidewalks, stars. Mountain cats in the bas relief prowled the friezes of the public library. I walked in a long way till the stores got sparse and the road was dark. Walked on the deep, singing shoulder of the highway till I got to the Greyhound bus station. Sad in the moonlight, the first glimpse I'd ever had of Hampton. The terminal was closed. I sat outside on a wooden bench beneath a yellow light bulb, waiting for it to open so I could go in and use the phone and have a cup of coffee. The clerk, a fat man with lifeless eyes, came to unlock the place at 6. We were the only people there. I went into the men's room and washed my face and had not 1 cup of coffee, but 2, which the clerk sold me grudgingly from a pot he brewed on a hot plate behind the counter. The sun was up. It was hard to see much through the grime-streaked windows. Defunct timetables papered the walls. Cigarette butts and chewing gum were stomped deep into the linoleum. The doors of the phone booth were covered in fingerprints. I closed them behind me and dialed Henry's number, half expecting he wouldn't answer, but to my surprise, he did on the second ring. "Where are you? What's the matter?" he said. I explained what happened. Ominous silence on the other end. "Was he in a cell by himself?" he said at last. "I don't know." "Was he conscious? I mean, could he talk?" "I don't know." Another long silence. "Look," I said, "he's going before the judge at 9. Why don't you meet me at the courthouse?" Henry didn't answer for a moment. Then he said, "It's best if you handle it. There are other considerations involved." "If there are other considerations, I'd appreciate knowing what they are." "Don't be angry," he said quickly. "It's just that I've had to deal with the police so much. They know me already, and they know him too besides." He paused. "I'm afraid I'm the last person Charles wants to see." "And why is that?" "Because we quarreled last night. It's a long story," he said as I tried to interrupt. "But he was very upset when I saw him last. And of all of us, I think you're the best terms with him at the moment." I said, though secretly I was mollified. "Charles is very fond of you. You know that. Besides, the police don't know who you are. I don't think they'll be able to associate you with that other business. I don't see that it matters at this point." "I am afraid that it does matter, more than you might think." There was a silence, during which I felt acutely the hopelessness of ever trying to get to the bottom of anything with Henry. He was like a propagandist, routinely with withholding information, thinking it only when it served his purposes. "What are you trying to say to me?" I said. "Now's not the time to discuss it." "If you want me to go down there, you'd better tell me what you're talking about." When he spoke, his voice was crackly and distant. Let's just say that for a while, things were much more touch and go than you realized. Charles has had a hard time. It's no one's fault, really, but he's had to shoulder more than his share of the burden. Silence. "I am not asking much of you." "Only that I do what you tell me," I thought, as I hung up the telephone. The courtroom was down the hall from the cells, through a pair of swinging doors with windows at the top. It looked very much like what I'd seen of the rest of the courthouse, circa 1950 or so, with peggy linoleum tiles and paneling that was yellowed and sticky looking with honey-colored varnish. I had not expected so many people would be there. There were 2 tables before the judge's bench. One with a couple of state troopers, the other with 3 or 4 unidentified men. A court reporter with her funny little typewriter. 3 more unidentified men in the spectators' area, sitting well apart from each other, as well as a poor haggard lady in a tan raincoat who looked like she was getting beat up by somebody on a regular basis. We rose for the judge. Charles's case was called first. He padded through the doors like a sleepwalker in his stocking feet, a court officer following behind him. His face was blurry and thick. They'd taken his belt and tie as well as his shoes, and he looked like a little like he was in his pajamas. The judge peered down at him. He was sour-faced, about 60, with a thin mouth and big, meaty jowls like a bloodhound's. "You have an attorney," he said in a strong Vermont accent. "No, sir," said Charles. "Wife or parent present?" "No, sir." "Can you post bail?" "No, sir," Charles said. He looked sweaty and disoriented. I stood up. Charles didn't see me, but the judge did. "Are you here to post bail for Mr. Macaulay?" he said. "Yes, I am." Charles turned to stare, lips parted, his expression as blank and trance-like as a 12-year-old's. "It'll be $500. You can pay it at the window down the hall to your left," said the judge in a bored monotone. "You'll have to appear again in 2 weeks, and I suggest you bring a lawyer. Do you have a job for which you need your vehicle?" One of the shabby, middle-aged men at the front spoke up. "It's not his car, Your Honor." The judge glowered at Charles, Charles hugged himself. Christ, it's cold, he said. Across the empty streets, across the square, they were all just pulling the blinds up at the bank. Wait here, I said. I'll go call a cab. He caught me by the arm. He was still drunk, but his night of boozing had done more damage to his clothes than to anything else. His face was fresh and flushed as a child's. Richard, he said. What? You're my friend, aren't you? I was in no mood to stand around on the courthouse steps and listen to this sort of thing. Sure, I said, and tried to disengage my arm. But he only clutched me tighter. Good old Richard, he said. I know who you are. I'm so glad it was you who came. I just want you to do me this one little favor. What's that? Don't take me home. What do you mean? Take me to the country, to Francis's. I don't have the key, but Mrs. Hatch could let me in, or I could bust a window or something. No, listen to this. I could get in through the basement. I've done it 1,000,000 of times. Wait, he said as I tried to interrupt again. You could come too. You could swing by school and get some clothes and... Hold on, I said, for the third time. I can't take you anywhere. I don't have a car. His face changed, and he let go of my arm. Oh, right, he said with a sudden bitterness. Thanks a lot. Listen to me. I can't. I don't have a car. I came down here in a taxicab. We can go in Henry's. No, we can't. The police took the keys. His hands were shaking. He ran them through his disordered hair. Then come home with me. I don't want to go home by myself. All right, I said. I was so tired. I was seeing spots. All right, just wait. I'll call a cab. No cab, he said, lurching backwards. I don't feel it. So hot. I think I'd rather walk. This walk from the courthouse steps to Charles's apartment in Northampton was not an inconsiderable one. It was 3 miles at least. A good portion of it lay along a stretch of highway. Cars whooshed past in a rush of exhaust. I was dead tired. My head ached and my feet were like lead. But the morning air was cool and fresh and seemed to bring Charles around a little. About halfway, he stopped at the dusty roadside window of a tasty freeze. Across the highway from the Veterans Hospital, and bought an ice cream soda. Our feet crunched on the gravel. Charles smoked a cigarette and drank his soda through a red and white striped straw. Black flies whined around our ears. So you and Henry had an argument, I said, just for something to say. Who told you? Him? Yes. I couldn't remember. It doesn't matter. I'm tired of him telling me what to do. You know what I wonder? I said. What? Not why he tells us what to do, but why we always have to do what he says. Beats me, said Charles. It's not as if much good has come of it. Oh, I don't know. straightforward. He had a specific house in mind, big old place, built in the 1800s, way out on some dirt road, tremendous grounds, servants' quarters, the whole bit. He even had the cash in hand. They must have talked for 2 hours. The realtor called up her manager at home and asked him to come down to the office. The manager asked Henry a million questions, called every one of his references. Everything was in order, but even they wouldn't rent it to him. Why? He laughed. Well, Henry looks a bit too good to be true, doesn't he? They couldn't believe someone his age, a college student, would pay so much for a place that big and isolated, just to live all by himself and study the great 12 cultures. What? They thought he was some kind of a crook. They thought he wasn't entirely above board, let's put it that way. Apparently the men from the FBI thought the same thing. They didn't think he killed Bunny, but they thought he knew something he wasn't telling. Obviously there had been a disagreement in Italy. Marion knew that. Cloak knew it. Even Julian did. They even tricked me into admitting it, though I didn't tell that to Henry. If you ask me, I think what they really thought was that he and Bunny had some money sunk into Cloak's drug dealing business. That trip to Rome was a big mistake. They could have done it inconspicuously, but Henry spent a fortune, throwing money around like crazy. They lived in a palazzo, for Christ's sake. People remembered them everywhere they went. I mean, you know Henry, that's just the way he is, but you have to look at it from their point of view. That illness of his must have looked pretty suspicious too. Wiring a doctor in the States for Demerol, plus those tickets to South America, putting them on his credit card, was about the stupidest thing he ever did. They found out about that, I said, horrified. Certainly, when they suspect somebody is stealing drugs, the financial records are the first thing they check. And good God, of all places, South America. Luckily, Henry's dad really does own some property down there. Henry was able to cook up something fairly plausible. Not that they believed him. It was more a matter of their not being able to disprove it. But I don't understand where they got this stuff about drugs. Imagine how it looked to them. On one hand, there was Cloak. The police knew he was dealing drugs on a pretty substantial scale. They also figured he was probably the middleman or somebody a lot bigger. There was no obvious connection between that and Bunny. But then there was Bunny's best friend with all this money. They can't quite tell where it's coming from. And during those last months, Bunny was throwing around plenty of money himself. Henry was giving it to him, of course, but they didn't know that. Fancy restaurants, Italian suits. Besides, Henry just looks suspicious. The way he acts, even the way he dresses. He looks like one of those guys with horn-rimmed glasses and armbands in a gangster movie. You know, the one who cooks the books with Al Capone or something. He lit another cigarette. Do you remember the night before that thing? The night before they found Bunny's body, he said, when you and I went to that awful bar, the one with the TV, and I got so drunk. Yes, that was one of the worst nights of my life. It looked pretty bad for both of us. Henry was almost sure he was going to be arrested the next day. I was so appalled that for a moment I couldn't speak. Why, for God's sake, I said at last. He drew deeply on his cigarette. The FBI men came to see him that afternoon, he said. Not long after they'd taken Cloak into custody, they told Henry they had enough probable cause to arrest half a dozen people, including himself, either for conspiracy or withholding evidence. Christ, I said, dumbfounded. Half dozen people. Who? I don't know exactly. They might have been bluffing. But Henry was worried sick. He warned me they'd probably be coming over to my place, and I just had to get out of there. I couldn't sit around waiting for them. He made me promise not to tell you. Even Camilla didn't know. There was a long pause. But they didn't arrest you, I said. Charles laughed. I noticed that his hands still shook a little. I think we have dear old Hampton College to thank for that, he said. Of course, a lot of the stuff didn't tie up. They figured that out from talking to Clunk. But still, they knew they weren't getting the truth, and they probably would have kept after it if the college had been a little more cooperative. Once Bunny's body was found, though, the administration just wanted to hush it up. Too much bad publicity. Freshman applications had gone down something like 20%, and the town police, whose business it was really, are very cooperative about such things. Cloak was in a lot of trouble, you know. Some of that drug stuff was serious. They could have thrown him in jail, but he got off with academic probation and 50 hours of community service. It didn't even go on his school record. It took me some moments to digest this. Cars and trucks whooshed past. After a while, Charles laughed again. It's funny, he said, pushing his fists deep in his pockets. We thought we were putting our ace man up front, but if one of the rest of us had handled it, it would have been much better. If it had been you, or Francis, even my sister, we could have avoided half of this. It doesn't matter. It's over now. No thanks to him. I was the one who had to deal with the police. He takes the credit. But it was me who actually had to sit around that goddamn station all hours, drinking coffee and trying to make them like me, you know, trying to convince them we're all just a bunch of regular kids. Same with the FBI, and that was even worse. Being the front for everybody, you know, always on guard. Having to say exactly the right thing and doing my best to size up things from their point of view. And you had to hit exactly the right note with these people too. You couldn't drop it for a second, trying to be all communicative and open, yet concerned too, you know, and at the same time, not at all nervous, though I could hardly pick up a cup without being afraid of spilling it, and a couple of times I was so panicky I thought I was just going to black out or break down or something. Do you know how hard without saying anything. Do you know where you're going to spend the summer? Said Charles. I haven't thought about it much, I said. I hadn't heard anything about the situation in Brooklyn, which tended to make me think it had fallen through. I'm going to Boston, Charles said. Frances's great aunt has an apartment on Marlborough Street, just a few doors from the public garden. She goes to the country in the summer, and Frances said if I wanted to stay there, I could. Sounds nice. It's a big place. If you wanted, you could come too. Maybe. You'd like it. Francis will be in New York, but he'll come up sometimes. Have you ever been to Boston? No. We'll go to the Gardner Museum and the piano bar at the Ritz. He was telling me about a museum they had at Harvard. Someplace where they had a million different flowers, all made of colored glass. When all of a sudden, with alarming swiftness, a yellow Volkswagen swooped up from the opposite lane and ground to a stop beside us. It was Judy Poofy's friend, Tracy. She rolled down her window and gave us a brilliant smile. Hi guys, she said. Want a ride? She dropped us off at Charles's place. It was 10 o'clock. Camilla was at home. God, said Charles, shouldering off his jacket. It fell in a heap on the floor. How do you feel? Drunk. Want some coffee? There's some in the kitchen, Charles said, yawning and running a hand through his hair. Mind if I have a bath? Go ahead. I'll be out in a minute. That cell was filthy. I think I might have fleas. He was more than a minute. I could hear him sneezing, running the hot and cold taps, humming to himself. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of orange juice and put some raisin bread in the toaster. While looking through the cabinet for coffee, I found a half-full jar of Horlick's malted milk. The label stared at me like a reproach. Bunny was the only one of us who ever drank malted milk. I pushed it to the rear of the cabinet, behind a jug of maple syrup. The coffee was ready, and I was on my second batch of toast when I heard a key in the lock, the front door opening. Camilla stuck her head into the kitchen. Hi, you, she said. Her hair was untidy, and her face pale and watchful. She looked like a little boy. Hi yourself. Want some breakfast? She sat down at the table beside me. How did it go? She said. I told her. She listened attentively, reached out and took a triangle of buttered toast from my plate, and ate it as she listened. Is he all right? She said. I didn't know exactly how she meant. All right. Sure, I said. There was a long silence. Very faintly, on a downstairs radio, a sprightly female voice sang a song about yogurt, backed by a chorus of mooing cows. She finished her toast and got up to pour herself some coffee. The refrigerator hummed. I watched her rummage in the cabinet for a cup. You know, I said, you ought to throw away that jar of malted milk you have in there. It was a moment before she answered. I know, she said. In the closet there's a scarf he left last time he was here. I keep running across it. It smells like him. Why don't you get rid of it? I keep hoping I won't have to. I hope one day I'll open the closet door was a bathrobe, and in his voice was still a trace of that liquidy thickness I knew so well. I thought you were in class. Small class. Julian let us out early. How do you feel? Fabulous, said Charles, padding into the kitchen, his moist feet tracking prints that evaporated instantly on the shiny tomato-red linoleum. He came up behind her and laid his hands on her shoulders, bending low. He put his lips close to the nape of her neck. How about a kiss for your jailbird brother? He said. She turned halfway, as if to touch her lips to his cheek, but he slid a palm down her back and tipped her face up to his and kissed her full on the mouth. Not a brotherly kiss. There was no mistaking it for that, but a long, slow, greedy kiss, messy and voluptuous. His bathrobe fell slightly open as his left hand sank from her chin to neck, collarbone, base of throat, his fingertips just inside the edge of her thin polka dot shirt and trembling over the warm skin there. I was astounded. She didn't flinch, didn't move. When he came up for breath, she pulled her chair in close to the table and reached for the sugar bowl as if nothing had happened. The spoon trickled against china. The smell of Charles, damp, alcoholic, sweet with lint and water, used for shaving, hung heavy in the air. She brought the cup up and took a sip, and it was only then I remembered Camilla didn't like sugar in her coffee. She drank it unsweetened, with milk. I was astounded. I felt I should say something, anything, but I couldn't think of a thing to say. It was Charles who finally broke the silence. I'm starving to death, he said, retying the knot of his bathrobe and pottering over to the refrigerator. The white door opened with a bark. He stopped to look in, his face radiant in the glacial light. I think I'm going to make some scrambled eggs, he said. Anyone else want some? Late that afternoon, after I'd gone home and had a shower and a nap, I went to visit Francis. Come in, he said, waving me in frenetically. His Greek books were spread out on the desk, a cigarette burned in a full ashtray. What happened last night? Was Charles arrested? Henry wouldn't tell me a thing. I got the part of the story from Camilla, but she didn't know the details. Sit down. Do you want a drink? What can I get for you? It was always fun to tell Francis a story. He leaned forward and hung on every word, reacting at appropriate intervals with astonishment, sympathy, dismay. When I was finished, he bombarded me with questions. Normally, enjoying his rapt attention, I would have strung it out much longer, but after the first decent pause, I said, Now I want to ask you something. He was lighting a first cigarette. He clicked shut the lighter and brought his eyebrows down. What is it? Though I had thought of various ways to phrase this question, it seemed, in the interest of clarity, most expedient to come to the point. Do you think Charles and Camilla ever sleep together? I said. He had just drawn in a big lungful of spurted out his nose the wrong way. What makes you ask something like that? He finally said. I told finger. I don't think it's anything that happens too frequently, he said, but you never know. Bunny always claimed he walked in on them once. I stared at him. He told Henry, not me. I'm afraid I don't know the details. Apparently, he had a key, and you remember how he used to barge in without knocking. Come now, he said. You must have had some idea. No, I said, though actually I had, from the time I'd first met them. I'd attributed this to my own mental perversity, some degenerate vagary of thought, a projection of my own desire, because he was her brother, and they did look an awful lot alike, and the thought of them together brought along with it predictable twinges of envy, scruple, surprise, another very much sharper one of excitement. Francis was looking at me keenly. Suddenly, I felt he knew exactly what I was thinking. They're very jealous of each other, he said. He much more than she. I always thought it was a childish, charming thing, you know, all verbal rough and tumble. Even Julie used to tease them about it. I mean, I'm an only child. So is Henry. What do we know about such things? We used to talk about what fun it would be to have a sister. He chuckled. More fun than either of us imagined, it seems, he said. Not that I think it's so terrible, either, from a moral standpoint, that is, but it's not all the casual, good-natured sort of thing that one might hope. It runs a lot more deep and nasty. Last fall, around the time when that farmer fellow, he trailed away, sat smoking for some moments, an expression of frustration and vague irritation on his face. Well, I said, what happened? Specifically, he shrugged. I can't tell you. I remember hardly anything that happened that night, which isn't to say the tenor of it isn't clear enough. He paused, started to speak, but thought better of it. Shook his head. I mean, after that night, it was obvious to everyone, he said. Not that it wasn't before. It's just that Charles was so much worse than anyone had expected. He sat staring into space for a moment. Then he shook his head and reached for another cigarette. It's impossible to explain, he said, but one can also look at it on an extremely simple level. They were always keen on each other, those two, and I'm no prude, but this jealousy I find astounding. One thing I'll say for Camilla, she's more reasonable about that sort of thing. Perhaps she has to be. What sort of thing? About Charles going to bed with people. Who's he been to bed with? He brought up his glass and took a big drink. Me, for one, he said. That shouldn't surprise you. If you drank as much as he does, I dare say I would have been to bed with you too. Despite the archness of his tone, which normally would have irritated me, there was a melancholy undernote in his voice. He drained off the rest of the whiskey and set the glass down on the end table with a bang. He said after a pause, it hasn't happened often, 3 or 4 times. The first time when I was a sophomore and he was a freshman. We were up late, drinking in my room. One thing led to another. Loads of fun on a rainy night, but you should have seen us at breakfast the next morning. He laughed bleakly. Remember the night Bunny died? He said when I was in your room. And Charles interrupted us. At that rather unfortunate moment, I knew what he was going to tell me. You left my room with him, I said. Yes. He was awfully drunk, actually a little too drunk, which was quite convenient for him as he pretended not to remember it the next day. Charles is very prone to these attacks of amnesia after he spends the night at my house. He looked at me out of the corner of his eye. He denies it all quite convincingly, and the thing is, he expects me to play along with him. You know, pretend it never happened. He said, I don't even think he does it out of guilt. As a matter of fact, he does it in this particularly light-hearted way, which infuriates me. I said, you like him a lot, don't you? I don't know what made me say this. Francis didn't blink. I don't know, he said coldly, reaching for a cigarette with his long, nicotine-stained fingers. I like him well enough, I suppose. We're old friends. Certainly, I don't fool myself that it's more than that. But I've had a lot of fun with him, which is a great deal more than you can say about Camilla. That was what Bunny would have called a shot across the bow. I was too surprised to even answer. Francis, though his satisfaction was evident, did not acknowledge his point. He leaned back in his chair by the window. The edges of his hair glowed metallic red in the sun. He said, it's unfortunate, but there it is. Neither one cares about anybody but himself, or herself, as the case may be. They like to present a unified front, but I don't even know how much they care about each other. Certainly they take a perverse pleasure in leading one on. Yes, she does lead you on, he said, when I tried to interrupt. I've seen her do it. And the same with Henry. He used to be crazy about her. I'm sure you know that. For all I know, he still is. As for Charles, well, basically, he likes girls. If he's drunk, I'll do. But just when I've managed to harden my heart, he'll turn around and be so sweet. I always fall for it. I don't know why. He was quiet for a moment. We don't run much to looks in my family. You know, all knuckles and cheekbones and beaky noses, he said. Maybe that's why I tend to equate physical beauty with qualities with which it has absolutely nothing to do. I see a pretty mouth or a moody pair of eyes and imagine all sorts of deep affinities, private kinships. Never mind that half a dozen jerks are clustered around the same person just because they've been duped by the same pair of eyes. He leaned over and energetically stubbed out his cigarette. She'll behave a lot more like Charles if she were allowed to. He's so possessive, though. He keeps her reeled in pretty tight. Can you imagine a worse situation? He watches her like a hawk, and he's also rather poor. Not that it matters much, he said hastily, realizing to whom he was speaking. But he is quite self-conscious about it. Very proud of his family, you know. Very well aware that he himself is a sot. There's something kind of Roman about it. All this regard he puts in his sister's honor. Bunny wouldn't go near Camilla, you know. He would hardly even look at her. He used to say that she wasn't his type, but I think the old Dutchman in him knew she was bad medicine. My God, I remember once, a long time ago, we had dinner at a ridiculous Chinese restaurant in Bennington. The Lobster Pagoda. It's closed now. Red bead curtains moat with tame ducks and goldfish. Somehow Camilla and I got separated from everyone else, and we were waiting there, comparing fortunes. Hers said something like, "Expect a kiss from the man of your dreams," which was too good to pass up. So we were both drunk, and we got a little carried away. And then Charles barreled out of nowhere and grabbed me by the back of the neck, and I thought he was going to throw me over the rail. Bunny was there too. He pulled him off, and Charles had the sense to say he'd been joking, but he wasn't. He hurt me, twisted my arm behind my back, and damn near pulled it out of its socket. I don't know where Henry was, probably looking at the moon and reciting some poem from the Tang Dynasty. Subsequent events had knocked it from my mind, but the mention of Henry made me think of what Charles had told me that morning about the FBI, and of another question, this one regarding Henry too. I was wondering if this was the time to bring up either of them when Francis said, abruptly and in a tone suggestive of bad news to follow, "You know, I was at the doctor's today." I waited for him to go on. He didn't. "What for?" I finally said. "Same stuff. Dizziness, chest pain. I wake up in the night and can't get my breath. Last week I went back to the hospital and let them run some tests, but nothing turned up. They referred me to this other fellow, a neurologist, and..." He shifted restlessly in his chair. "He didn't find anything. None of these sick doctors are any good. Julian gave me the name of a man in New York. He was the one who cured the Shah of Islam, of that blood disease. It was all in the papers. Julian says he's the best diagnostician in the country and one of the best in the world. He's booked 2 years in advance, but Julian says maybe if he calls him, he might agree to see me." He was reaching for another cigarette, and the last, untouched, was still smoldering in the ashtray. "The way you smoke," I said. "No wonder you're short of breath." "That has nothing to do with it," he said irritably, tamping the cigarette on the back of his wrist. "That's just what these stupid Vermonters tell you. Stop smoking. Cut out booze and coffee." "I've been smoking half my life. You think I don't know how it affects me? You don't get these nasty cramping pains in your chest from cigarettes, nor from having a few drinks either. Besides, I have all these other symptoms. Heart palpitations, ringing in the ears. Smoking can have totally weird effects on your body." Francis frequently made fun of me when I used some phrase he perceived as Californian. "Totally weird," he said maliciously, mimicking my accent. "Suburban, hollow, flat. Really?" I looked at him slouching in his chair, polka dot tie, narrow polished shoes, foxy narrow face. His grin was foxy too, and showed too many teeth. I was sick of him. I stood up. The room was so smoky that my eyes watered. "Yeah," I said. "I've got to go now." Francis's snide expression faded. "You're mad, aren't you?" he said. "No." "Yes, you are." "No, I'm not." I said. These sudden, panicky attempts at consolation annoyed me more than his insolent unheard of to see an occasional teacher standing under the bare light bulb of Durban's basement. Arnie Weinstein say, the Marxist economist, or the haggard, scraggle-haired Englishman who taught classes at Stern and DeVoe. Long gone, I had watched grim security men dismantling the underground laboratory, hauling out cartons of beakers and popular piping, while Durban's head chemist, a small pimple-faced boy from Akron, named Cal Clarkin, stood by and wept, still in his trademark high-top sneakers and lab coat. The anthropology teacher, who for 20 years had taught voices and visions, the thought of Carlos Castaneda, a course which featured, at its conclusion, a mandatory campfire ritual at which pot was smoked, announced quite suddenly that he was leaving for Mexico on sabbatical. Arnie Weinstein took to frequenting the towny bars, where he attempted to discuss Marxist theories with hostile countermen. The scraggle-haired Englishman had returned to his primary interest, which was chasing girls 20 years younger than himself. As part of the new drug awareness policy, Hampton was hosting an inter-college tournament in game show format, which tested students' knowledge about drugs and alcohol. The questions were developed by the National Council for Alcoholism and Substance Abuse. The shows were moderated by a local TV personality, Liv Ocavello, and were broadcast live on Channel 12. Unexpectedly, the quizzes proved wildly popular, though not in the spirit the sponsors might have hoped. Hampton had assembled a crack team, which, like one of those commando forces in the movies, made up of desperate fugitives, men with freedom to gain and nothing to lose, proved virtually invincible. It was an all-star lineup: Clark Rayburn, Bram Guernsey, Jack Teitelbaum, Laura Stora, none other than the legendary Cal Clarkin heading the team. Cal was participating in hopes of being allowed back into school next term. Cloak and Bram and Laura as part of their required hours of community service. Jack was merely along for the ride. Their combined expertise was nothing short of stunning. Together, they led Hampton to victory after crashing victory over Williams, Vassar, Sarah Lawrence, fielding with dazzling speed and skill such questions as, name 5 drugs in the Thorazine family, or what are the effects of PCP? But even though business had been seriously curtailed, I was not surprised to find that Cloak was still plying his trade, though a good bit more discreetly than he had used to in the old days. One Thursday night, before a party, I went down to Judy's room to ask for an aspirin. After a brief but mysterious inquisition from behind the locked door, found Cloak inside, shades pulled, busy with her mirror and her druggist skills. "Hi," he said, ushering me inside and locking the door behind me again. "What can I do for you tonight?" Nothing, thanks," I said. "I'm just looking for Judy. Where is she?" "Oh," he said, crossing back to his work. "She's in the costume shop. I thought she probably sent you over. I like Judy, but she's got to make such a big production of everything, which is definitely not cool." Not cool. Carefully, he tapped a measure of powder into an open fold of paper. At all. His hands trembled. It was evident that he had been dipping pretty freely into his own wares, but I had to toss my own scale shit happened. And what the fuck am I supposed to do? Go up to the infirmary? She was running around all day, at lunch and stuff, rubbing her nose and saying, "Grandma's here, Grandma's here." Lucky nobody knew what the fuck she was talking about, but still. He nodded at the open book beside him, Jansen's History of Art, which was cut practically to tatters. Even these fucking bindles. She got fixated on the idea that I had to make these fancy ones. Jesus, open them up and there's a fucking Tintoretto on the inside. It gets pissed if I cut them out, so that the cupid's butt or whatever isn't like right in the center. "How's Camilla?" he said, glancing up. "Fine," I said. I didn't want to think about Camilla. I didn't want to think of anything having to do with Greek or Greek class, either one. "How's she liking her new place?" said Cloak. "What?" He laughed. "Don't you know?" he said. "She moved." "What? Where to?" "Don't know. Down the street, probably." "Stop by to see the twins. Hand me that blade, would you?" "Stopped by to see them yesterday, and Henry was helping her put her stuff in boxes." He had abandoned his work at the scales and was now cutting out lines on the mirror. "Charles is going to Boston for the summer, and she's staying here. Said she didn't want to stay there alone, and it was too much of a pain to sublet. Sounds like there are going to be a lot of us here this summer." He offered me the mirror, and I rolled up 20. "Bram and I are looking for a place right now." "This is very good," I said, half a minute or so later, just as the first euphoric sparkle was starting to hit my synapses. "Yeah, it's excellent, isn't it? Especially after that awful shit of Laura's that was going around. Those FBI guys analyzed it and said it was about 80% talcum powder or something." He wiped his nose. "Did they ever come talk to you, by the way?" "The FBI? No." "I'm surprised. After all that lifeboat shit they were feeding everybody." "What are you talking about?" "Christ, they were saying all kinds of weird stuff. There was a conspiracy going on. They knew that Henry and Charles and I were involved. We were all in bad trouble, and there was only room for one guy on the lifeboat out, and that guy was going to be the guy that talked first." He sniffed again and rubbed his nose with his knuckle. "In a way, it got worse after my dad set the lawyer up. Why do you need a lawyer if you're innocent? All that kind of shit. Thing is, even the fucking lawyer couldn't figure out what they were trying to get me to confess to. They kept saying that my friends, Henry and Charles, had ratted on me, that they were the guilty ones, and if I didn't start talking, I might get blamed for something I didn't even do." My heart was pounding, and not just from the cocaine. "Talking," I said. "About what?" "Search me. My lawyer said not to worry, that they were full of shit. I talked to Charles, and he said they were giving him the same line too. And I mean, I know you like Henry, but I think he got pretty flipped out by the whole thing." "What?" "Well, I mean, he's so straight. Probably never even had an overdue library book. And out of the blue, here comes the fucking FBI all over him. I don't know what the hell he told them, but he was trying to point them in any direction but towards himself." "Like what direction?" "Like me." He reached for a cigarette. found Bunny's body. They were coming over to talk to Charles again. I know that. But Henry called and tipped him off that they were on their way. That was when I was staying over at the twins. Well, I didn't want to see them either, so I headed over to Bram's, and Charles, I guess, just went to some towny bar and got completely fucked up. My heart was thumping so wildly I thought I would burst in my chest like a red balloon. Had Henry got scared, tired, tried to sick the FBI on me? That didn't make sense. There was no way, at least that I could see, he could set me up without incriminating himself. Then again, paranoia, I thought, I have to stop this. Maybe it was no coincidence that Charles had stopped by my room that night on his way to the bar. Maybe he had been apprised of the whole thing and, unbeknownst to Henry, had come over and successfully lured me out of harm's way. You look like you could use a drink, man, said Cloak presently. Yeah, I said. I had been sitting for a long time without saying anything. Yeah, I guess I could. Why don't you go to the Villager tonight, Thirsty Thursday? 2 for the price of 1. Are you going? Everybody's going. Shit, you're trying to tell me you never went to Thirsty Thursday before. So I went to Thirsty Thursday with Cloak and Judy, with Bram and Sophie Dearbold and some friends of Sophie's, and a lot of other people I didn't even know. And though I don't know what time I got home, I didn't wake up till 6 the next evening when Sophie knocked at my door. My stomach hurt and my head was splitting in two, but I put on my robe and let her in. She had just got out of ceramics class and was wearing a t-shirt and faded old jeans. She had brought me a bagel from the snack bar. Are you okay? She said. Yes, I said, though I had to hold onto the back of my chair to stand up. You were really drunk last night. I know, I said, getting out of bed made me feel suddenly much worse. Red spots jumped in front of my eyes. I was worried. I thought I'd better come check on you. She laughed. Nobody's seen you all day. Somebody told me they saw the flag at the guard booth at half-mast, and I was afraid you might be dead. I sat on the bed, breathing hard, and stared at her. Her face was like a half-remembered fragment of a dream. Bar, I thought. There had been the bar, Irish whiskeys and a pinball game with Bram. Sophie's face blue in the sleazy neon light. More cocaine, cut into lines with a school ID, off the side of a compact disc case. Then a ride in the back of someone's truck, a golf sign on the highway, someone's apartment. The rest of the evening was black. Vaguely, I remembered a long, earnest conversation with Sophie, standing by an ice-filled sink in someone's kitchen, iced her brow, and Genesee MoMA calendar on the wall. Certainly, a coil of fear wrenched my stomach. Certainly I hadn't said anything about Bunny. Certainly not. Rather frantically, I searched my memory. Certainly if I had, she would not be in my room now. Looking at me the way she was would not have brought me to this toasted bagel on a paper plate, the smell of which, it was an onion bagel, made me want to retch. How did I get home? I said, looking up at her. Don't you remember? No. Blood hammered nightmarishly in my temples. Then you were drunk. We called a cab from Jack Dell Palms. And where did we go? Here. Had we slept together? Her expression was neutral, offering no clue. If we had, I wasn't sorry. I liked Sophie. I knew she liked me. She was one of the prettiest girls at Hampton, besides. But this was the kind of thing you like to know for sure. I was trying to think how I could ask her, someone knocked at the door. The raps were like gunshots. Sharp pains ricocheted through my head. "Come in," said Sophie. Francis stuck his head around the door. "Well, look at this, would you?" he said. He liked Sophie. I asked it. "It's the car trip reunion, and nobody asked me." Sophie stood up. "Francis, hello. How have you been?" "Good, thanks. I haven't talked to you since the funeral." "I can't read, Astrid." "You're in my way." "Lay down. Lay down. You gotta lay down. There you go." "Good, thanks. I haven't talked to you since the funeral." "I know. I was thinking about you just the other day. How have you been?" I lay back on the bed, my stomach boiling. The two of them were conversing animatedly. I wished they would both leave. "Well, well," said Francis after a long interlude, peering over Sophie's shoulder at me. "What's wrong with tiny patient?" Get off. Careful. No. Come here. Just lay down. He came over to the bed. He seemed up close, slightly agitated. "Well, I hope you've learned your lesson," he said brightly, and then in Greek added, "Important news, my friend." My heart sank. I had screwed up. I had been careless, talked too much, said something weird. "What have I done?" I said. I said it in English. If Francis was flustered, he didn't look it. "I haven't the slightest idea," he said. "Do you want some tea or something?" I tried to figure out what he was trying to say. The pounding agony in my head was such that I couldn't concentrate on anything. Nausea swelled in a great green wave, trembled at the crest, sank and rolled again. I felt saturated with despair. "Everything," I thought tremulously, "everything would be okay if only I could have a few moments of quiet, and if I lay very, very still." "No," I said finally. "Please." "Please what?" The waves swelled again. I rolled over on my stomach and gave a long, miserable moan. Sophie caught on first. "Come on," she said to Francis. "Let's go. I think we ought to let him get back to sleep." I fell into a tormented half-dream state, from which I woke several hours later to a soft knock. The room was now dark. The door creaked open, and a flag of light fell in from the corridor. Francis slipped in and closed the door behind him. He switched on the weak reading lamp on my desk and pulled the chair over to my bed. "I'm sorry, but I've got to talk to you," he said. "Something very odd has happened." I had forgotten my earlier fright. It came back with a sick, bilious wash. "What is it?" "Camilla has moved. She's moved out of the apartment. All of her things are gone. Charles is right there right now, drunk nearly out of his mind. He said she's living at the Abelmaro Inn. Can you imagine? The I said finally. You did. He was astonished. Who told you? I think it was Cloak. Cloak? When was this? I explained as far as memory allowed. I forgot about it, I said. Forgot? How could you forget something like that? I sat up a bit. Fresh pain surged through my head. What difference does it make? I said a little angrily. If she wants to leave, I don't blame her. Charles will just have to straighten up, that's all. But the Albemarle, said Francis. Do you have any idea how expensive it is? Of course I do, I said irritably. The Albemarle was the nicest inn in town. Presidents had stayed there, and movie stars. So what? Francis put his head in his hands. Richard, he said, you're dense. You must have brain damage. I don't know what you're talking about. How about $200 a night? Do you think the twins have that kind of money? Who the hell do you think is paying for it? I stared at him. Henry, that's who, said Francis. He came over here when Charles was out and moved her there, lock, stock, and barrel. Charles came home and her things were gone. Can you imagine? He can't even get in touch with her. She's registered under a different name. Henry won't tell him anything. For that matter, he won't tell me anything either. Charles is absolutely beside himself. He asked me to call Henry and see if I could get anything out of him. I couldn't, of course. He was like a brick wall. What's the big deal? Why are they making such a secret of it? I don't know. I don't know Camilla's side, but I think Henry is being very foolish. Maybe she has reasons of her own. She doesn't think that way, said Francis, exasperated. The cat was getting into my food. Maybe she has reasons of her own. She doesn't think that way, said Francis, exasperated. I know Henry. This is just the sort of thing he'd do. It's just the way he'd do it. But even if there's a good reason, it's the wrong way to go about it, especially now. Charles is in a state. Henry should know better than to antagonize him after the other night. Uncomfortably, I thought of the walk home from the police station. You know, there's something I've meant to tell you, he said. I told him about Charles' outburst. Oh, he's mad at Henry, all right, said Francis. He's told me the same thing. Then Henry pushed it all off on him, basically. But what does he expect? When you get down to it, I don't think Henry asked all that much of him. That's not the reason he's angry. The real reason is Camilla. Do you want to know my theory? What? I think Camilla and Henry have been slipping around with each other for quite some time. I think Charles has been suspicious for a while, but until lately, he didn't have any proof. Then he found something out. I don't know what exactly, he said, raising his hand as I tried to interrupt. But it's not hard to imagine. I think it's something he found out down at the Cochranes. Something he saw or heard. And I think it must have happened before we arrived. The night before they left for Connecticut with Cloak, everything seemed fine. But you remember what Charles was like when he got there? And by the time we left, they weren't even speaking. upstairs hallway. God knows what happened. Then, if Cloak was smart enough to catch on, said Francis. Henry was sick, probably wasn't thinking too clearly, and the week we came back, when he was holed up in his apartment, I think Camilla was there a lot. She was there, I know, the day I went to make him that Mycenaean book, and I think she might have even spent the night a couple times. But then he got well, and Camilla came home, and for a while after that, things were okay. Remember? Around the time you took me to the hospital. I don't know about that, I said. I told him about the glass I had seen laying broken in the fireplace at the twins' apartment. Well, who knows what was really happening? Well, who knows what was really happening? At least they seemed better, and Henry was in good spirits too. Then there was that quarrel, the night Charles ended up in jail. Nobody seems to want to say exactly what that was about, but I'll bet it had something to do with her. And now this. Good God, Charles is in a bloody rage. Do you think he's sleeping with her, Henry? If he's not, he's certainly done everything he possibly can to convince Charles that he is. He stood up. I tried to call him again before I came over here, he said. He wasn't in. I expect he's over at the Albemarle. I'm going to drive by and see if his car is there. There must be some way you can find out what room she's in. I've thought about that. I can't get anything out of the desk clerk. Maybe I'd have better luck talking to one of the maids, but I'm afraid I'm not very good at that sort of thing. He sighed. I wished I could see her for just 5 minutes. If you find her, do you think you could talk her into coming home? I don't know. I must say, I wouldn't care to be living with Charles right now, but I still think everything would be okay if Henry would just keep out of it.